All right, quick and dirty. Let's say mean things about a company that makes our favorite game. And we're not talking about graphics. Everyone with eyes already knows that the graphics in Path of Exile 2 are pretty fantastic. Path of Exile 2 is kind of a fake catastrophe right now. At least, I hope it is. Because if it's not, Chris Wilson might have had a stroke. You're probably wondering what I mean by that, but basically, the game is probably going to be really good. They have also more or less said that Path of Exile 1 is it's going away. It's not being upgraded. Obviously, someone's going to say, nah, they're going to maintain both, but don't be stupid. Path of Exile 1 is a backup plan. Chris Wilson, the guy who has repeatedly talked about how important it is not to split the player base, isn't going to release a second separate game without the intention that it eventually completely supplants the first. As for Path of Exile 2's gameplay, I can't wait to see what it's really like, because currently we're being shown a watered-down version of the game with very underpowered characters. This is something they do a lot, I'm not just making it up. The point is they're trying to show that in-depth, kind of punchy, move around and adapt to the enemies stuff for the Diablo 4 crowd. If you haven't picked up on it yet, GGG actually tells us when they're doing this. The big tell in my experience is they'll have a bunch of mana flasks and a bunch of life flasks and no utility down on the bar. That's always how you know that the character is not serious. It's not a representation of how powerful you can actually be if you know what you're doing in the game. It's also more or less why we never know how good a skill is going to be. Even when they show it off in a trailer, we don't know if they're using stuff to juice that character beyond a reasonable amount, or if they're using a situation to make a strong skill look bad because they're not showing the flagship interaction that makes it really good for clear or something along those lines. You can tell when the sorceress is being played in one of the gameplay trailers that they are absolutely misdirecting the reality of how the game will be played. You're probably not going to spec into two elements with your dual passive tree weapons swap bullshit. We need a name for that. Anyway, you're going to spec AoE and single target. That's what you're gonna do. I'm not saying what they showed won't happen, but it's gonna be a more niche thing. There's just no way that's ever going to be the standard unless it's completely overpowered and broken, in which case it'll get nerfed. Now, we've got a lot of good to say about Path of Exile 2 as well, and I've already said a little bit of good, but I mean, the boss design looks so good. The built-in role for characters is awesome and creates really fantastic design space, and weapon swapping looks like it's actually going to have a ton of potential. What I'm concerned about is that GGG underestimates how quickly players are going to figure out how to make the game zoom. And I say that because a lot of things might be balanced around people not doing that. For instance, the monk gets some sort of power charge culling mechanic that you have to actively participate in, and that's an issue because that just absolutely will not be used. What's really good is that all melee skills have a movement component built into them now, but that doesn't give them design space now to go back and add clunkiness in return for player power. Players will just find power that isn't clunky and use that instead. And they won't make every build use a mechanic like that because it's shit, right? There's got to be room for you to not have to do that because a majority of the player base is not going to tolerate it. In reality, I'm going to assume there's a way to generate charges for these skills that rely on them that requires some decent investment. And that will be how you're actually supposed to bring those charge-consuming skills online and make regular use of them. I could be wrong about this next part, but I think we won't know anything real till beta. Sure, Kriparian and Zizarin are going to show us some gameplay from people who aren't afraid to break the game in half, but this is a controlled environment. Exilecon is a commercial, a really high investment one meant to hype up the game and surround it with people who are already super fans, like me. I would be fanboying really bad if I were there. I would also be concerned. Honestly, it's probably what Reddit is doing right now, where you see a lot of negativity because people know. No one's stupid. Everyone knows what can happen with a game like this. It could be Armageddon for grinding gear games. The truth is, I have no small amount of concern for what the reality of the situation is going to be, but for my initial assessment, I think GGG and Chris Wilson are looking to slowly phase Path of Exile 1 into a life support game, kind of how Diablo 2 is now. You know what? Fine. Path of Exile 1 is packed with content to the point that adding more has started to become overbearing. I can't talk about Path of Exile being the best ARPG and not have a little faith that the sequel is going to continue that, but I'm also concerned. It's a completely unrelated comment, but I used to host Dungeons & Dragons games all the time. People want to play the game that they want to play. If Path of Exile 2 isn't that game, people aren't going to play it. Hopefully, when the inevitable complaints come in during beta, GGG won't be too proud or stubborn to make the changes that are necessary for the game to actually be a successor to Path of Exile 1. Anyway, that's all. Can't wait to see what else they have to say. I'm not panicking about Guardian yet. I have seen the rework. I have a feeling the new built-in minions are going to provide buffs to fix the whole situation up and make it not seem as bleak as it is. And if they don't, I guess that's the build gone.